right, guys.
Hello. All right. Awesome. So hopefully you had some good discussion about case one. We're just going to kind of talk through some learning points about case one. Case one is something every single person in this room will deal with. You will deal with a resident who has an exorbitant amount of requests, some academic, some personal, and you're going to figure out how to resolve them. And the answer that you want to say is, well, Grace is just going to get the worst schedule, right? Like she's the off-service intern with no requests, and you're just going to like punt everything to her and give your friend the best schedule, right? So you will all be in that situation, right? But the schedule is a web. It's a domino, right? And the way I like to think of the schedule is there is a certain amount of pain to be had in the schedule, and you have to spread the pain. Everybody has to have an equal amount of pain. And that's where the point Jean was talking about earlier is you cannot make everybody happy, but you have to make things fair. So the way you can kind of get around some of this is setting those expectations early, right? How many days are you allowed to ask off for in a month? Is there an academic limit? Is a personal limit? And every program is going to be different, but setting those expectations earlier makes that conversation with Arjun, who's your friend, to say, hey, what's your priority here? This is a lot of days off. And you can also tailor that discussion based on the year of the resident, right? So if this is a junior resident, this is one of your interns, and they're coming in, that's a great time to have a professionalism chat. Like, hey, what do you think is going to happen when you're a junior faculty member? You show up and say, I need 12 days off in a month, right? Your practice is not going to be that pumped to have you as a faculty member if that's your first ask off the bat. So you can kind of have a conversation, right? Use that as a teaching moment, as a mentoring moment for your junior residents. If this is a colleague and this is like a co-resident your year, a good friend, and this becomes a recurrent issue, this is probably something that you're going to have to bump up the chain a little bit to kind of get around a little bit of that awkwardness. Another thing to think about is your off-service resident. That is always going to be kind of the answer, depending on how you staff your department, is to put a lot of the pain on the off-service resident. But think about how that looks to other departments in the hospital, right? How do you want your department to be portrayed? How do you want your residents to be treated when they're on off-service rotations? Do you want them to have the worst schedules? No, right? You want to take pride in your rotation that you're giving to the off-service residents. You want them to take good care of patients. You want them to be well. So just consider that when you have off-service residents. The last point that I have for this is when it comes to off-service residents, you don't work in a vacuum. You have a lot of people around you. Consider early on in your year sitting down with the medicine chiefs, the peds chiefs, whoever sends you a lot of off-service residents and you send them a lot of residents, and grab a drink, grab an appetizer, grab something and put a face to the name. That way, when you're emailing and you have a request, hey, I need my resident off for graduation. I need my resident off for the in-service. You're not just a person on the end of a computer. You're someone that they know that you had a beer with, and it makes that relationship a little bit easier. It's something that me and my co-chiefs did early in the year, and it paid off in dividends throughout to know the people that I was emailing with and dealing with a lot.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize that point enough. If you haven't had a chance to do this yet, definitely reach out to the chiefs from the other departments. I think at my program, this was really the first year where we attempted to do that, and it really smoothed everything over for the entire year. And just to get a sense of this, how many of you, just even for a second, considered shifting the burden onto the off-service intern when you saw this sheet? Just like, be honest, raise your hand. Yeah, I mean, there's always a part of you that's like, well, there's my residency, and then there's everyone else who's just kind of visiting the department. But remember that intern is one day going to grow up into a senior resident who might then become a chief, and that chief is going to remember what happened when they were in the ED, and when they're scheduling your residents, they may decide to kind of pay back the favor. So definitely form good relationships. I think it's even a good rule to treat the off-service people even better sometimes than you do your own residents. Hopefully you can treat everyone well, but remember that if there's rules from another department, you should be strictly following those, whereas the rules within your own department, you can talk to your leadership, you can kind of have internal discussion. When it's external, it's better to kind of treat your guests well. And make sure that they're not violating their own departmental rules, because otherwise that's going to escalate into an interdepartmental situation that you probably don't want to go there.
You're definitely going to have some personal biases depending on who the resident is, right? You have to make the schedule for your best friend in residency and the resident you probably don't love so much. Not that you don't love any of your residents. I'm sure everybody loves everybody, right? So you have to check your biases a little bit and say, am I being fair? And I used my co-chiefs a lot for that. Hey, can you take a look at so-and-so's schedule? How does it look? And just bouncing it off different people. So,
all right.
I'm going to move to case 2.
So we're going to go on to case 2. So just flip your sheet over. And it's just a paragraph, but there's a lot of discussion there, so we'll come back in 7 minutes.